Satellite imagery has revealed scorched and discolored terrain across Darfur, haunting evidence of mass violence. Humanitarian groups estimate that 800,000 people may have died, though official figures remain uncertain. Yet the world stays silent. I'm going to show you the gold reserves that explain why nobody cares. When we speak of genocide, we think of hidden horrors, shadowy massacres in remote landscapes. But what is unfolding in El Fasher, the regional capital of Darfur in western Sudan, is anything but hidden. Satellite analyses show large reddish and burned zones around civilian sites, which researchers interpret as possible evidence of mass violence. In the early hours after the paramilitary force known as the Rapid Support Forces (RSF) stormed El Fasher in October 2025, analysts at Yale Humanitarian Research Lab identified clusters of objects consistent with human bodies, and long stretches of red-toned ground around them, visible via satellite. They concluded, documented atrocities are likely continuing. The RSF's siege of Darfur has brought back the darkest memories of the early 2000s Janjaweed campaign, but far worse, analysts say. Human rights reports describe executions, widespread sexual violence, siege tactics, and mass displacement. Let's go back in time briefly. When the 2003 Darfur mass violence erupted, government-backed Arab militias slaughtered members of the non-Arab African tribes, such as the Masalit, killing perhaps 200,000 and displacing millions. Today, the RSF is the successor of those militias. This time, they are armed not just with trucks and rifles, but with drones, heavy artillery, and satellite-monitored blockades. And the casualty numbers, while difficult to verify fully, are staggering. Some humanitarian analysts and rights groups estimate the dead at 800,000 plus across Darfur and neighboring zones since the new civil war began. Note, this is an estimate drawn from multiple reports of documented atrocities, blockades, famine deaths, executions, and forced displacement, not a precise government figure. The magnitude of suffering places this among the largest ongoing human catastrophes. Consider the following story. In one displacement camp near El Fasher, aid workers reported doctors and medical staff being killed, clinics destroyed, and families trapped without food, water, or medicine, as the RSF sealed off escape routes. In April 2025 alone, more than 200 civilians were reportedly killed in just 2 days in camps at Zamzam and Abu Shuk. In one hospital attack in January 2025, drones struck the Saudi Maternal Teaching Hospital in El Fasher, killing at least 70 people, a shocking example of deliberate targeting of healthcare in a besieged city. As the siege tightened, the RSF constructed an earthen berm around El Fasher, trapping civilians inside, preventing food, fuel, and aid supplies from reaching them, as documented by satellite imagery. Every day the death toll rises, not only from bullets and bombs, but from starvation, disease, exposure, and the collapse of civilian structures. The UN Secretary General recently described Sudan's plight as spiraling out of control. Now, to my audience of proud Africans committed to sovereignty, this is not simply a far-off atrocity to view with distant horror. This is a crisis of African dignity, of African life, right on our continent. The killing of our sisters and brothers in Darfur is a stain on all of us, and we must ask, why is the world so quiet? When we examine the evidence, the imagery, the testimony, we see the patterns. Besieged towns, ethnic targeted killings, looted camps, and blood so visible from space that denial becomes impossible. The many thousands fleeing into the desert, the young men stripped from their families and shot, the women taken. And the pictures so horrific, they shock even seasoned humanitarian investigators. The RSF, led by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, has grown into a militia empire, controlling vast territories, collecting taxes from mining operations, ruling through fear. In Darfur especially, survivors say the RSF targets certain ethnic groups, homes destroyed, villages razed, and people forcibly removed, according to survivor reports. So, let me be clear, this is genocide in everything but name. While not always formally designated, The patterns of documented atrocities, intent to destroy an ethnic group, and the systematic nature of the atrocities meet the threshold of the 1948 Genocide Convention. The U.S. State Department has declared that the RSF and allied militias have committed in Darfur. Yet still, the global outrage, the worldwide rush to mobilize, is missing. That silence is the second tragedy here, and we cannot accept it. As Africans, as people who know what sovereignty, dignity, and self-determination truly mean, we have to wake up. What makes this silence even more haunting is the wealth buried beneath the same ground now soaked with blood. When you trace the pattern of destruction in Darfur, the massacres don't occur randomly. They follow invisible fault lines, geological ones. Beneath the charred villages, below the scorched earth, lie vast deposits of gold. Sudan is the third largest gold producer in Africa, after Ghana and South Africa. Much of that gold lies in Darfur, South Kordofan, and Blue Nile, regions that have known little peace since independence. The overlap between violence and resource-rich zones appears deliberate, suggesting that extraction and conflict are tragically intertwined. The Rapid Support Forces have turned gold into their war chest. Hemeti, their commander, once boasted that his family business, Al Junaid, controlled significant gold exports. International investigations later revealed how the RSF used these mines to fund arms purchases, pay fighters, and buy political loyalty. They run mobile refineries and smuggle unregistered gold through the desert into Chad and Libya, then onward to Dubai, where the gold is laundered into the global market. You see, this is not merely a war for power, it's a resource war hidden behind ethnic smoke. While the world frames Darfur as tribal conflict, behind that simplistic headline lies the real engine. Billions in gold moving quietly offshore. According to Reuters and Bloomberg investigations, Sudan's gold exports to the United Arab Emirates nearly doubled between 2021 and 2024, even as violence worsened. And the timing is telling. Each spike in gold exports corresponds to new offensives by the RSF. It's as if every massacre clears another stretch of land for mining. Darfur's most violent regions, Jebel Amer, Kutum, and North Darfur, are not just conflict zones. They are gold zones. Satellite analysis shows RSF-controlled mines overlapping almost exactly with the areas of heaviest civilian killing. The gold extracted from these zones is flown to Khartoum or Port Sudan, trucked to Chad, or smuggled directly to Dubai, where it enters the formal market under false paperwork. Now, let's look at who's enabling this. The UAE has emerged as one of the largest buyers of Sudanese gold. According to UN and media investigations, some private traders based there have been linked to conflict gold networks, though the Emirati government denies any role in the fighting. Officially, the Emirati government denies supporting the RSF, but multiple UN expert reports suggest that gold trading companies linked to the Emirates are buying conflict gold in massive quantities. The motive? Simple. Control the supply chain, control the ports. Why else would a small Gulf state pour resources into a desert militia thousands of kilometers away? Because Sudan gives access to the Red Sea, one of the most strategic trade corridors on Earth. Control Darfur's interior gold, control the routes that lead eastward, and you control both wealth and maritime access. But the UAE isn't alone. While the Emiratis finance gold extraction, Russia's Wagner Group, now restructured under new names like Africa Corps, handles the logistics, protection, and transport. Since 2017, Wagner operatives have maintained a deep presence in Sudan, training RSF fighters and running gold operations from mines near Al Baidia and Jebel Amer. Reports by CNN and The Guardian describe flights moving Sudanese gold toward Middle Eastern and Russian-linked destinations, allegedly helping Moscow's economy amid sanctions. Think about that for a second. Sudan's gold helps finance Russia's global ambitions, while the blood that stains it flows from African soil. It's a grim web, one where foreign mercenaries and Gulf financiers exploit Africa's chaos to fund their own geopolitical strategies. Meanwhile, major powers issue statements of concern but take little concrete action, a silence that many observers view as moral failure. Why this selective blindness? Because Sudan has no oil fields of global importance, no pipelines that threaten Western energy supply, no NATO interest to protect. When Libya's oil was at stake, they called it humanitarian intervention. When Darfur's gold is at stake, they call it a complex internal issue. Let's recall, in 2011, when Libya descended into turmoil, NATO mobilized within weeks, citing humanitarian urgency. But today, as Sudan faces an even deeper catastrophe, the world's response is muted. The contrast exposes how strategic interests often determine which crises receive action and which do not. No sanctions on gold traders, no coordinated embargo, no emergency summits. Why? Because the gold already flows through channels Western powers benefit from indirectly. When that gold reaches refineries in Dubai, it enters the global financial bloodstream, losing its identity. From there, it's traded in London, Zurich, and Shanghai. By the time it becomes a wedding ring or a bank reserve, no one remembers the villages burned to produce it. This is why Darfur's atrocities receive no intervention, because the global demand system continues to function as if nothing has changed. And make no mistake, the RSF's gold empire doesn't just fund war, it buys legitimacy. By controlling the mines, they buy loyalty from local tribal leaders. They finance propaganda networks. They even pay off certain politicians in neighboring states to look the other way as convoys cross their borders. It's an economic ecosystem of blood. Meanwhile, Sudan's army, under General al-Burhan, controls the eastern corridor and tries to claim international recognition. But even within his faction, gold revenues find their way into private pockets. The country's formal institutions have collapsed. Central banks can't track exports. Taxation is meaningless. This is warlord capitalism at its purest form. The African Union has struggled to mount an effective, unified response, issuing limited statements even as the humanitarian crisis deepens. Many Africans across the diaspora ask, where is the same urgency the AU showed in mediating the Niger and Gabon crises? Why do we see emergency summits for coups, but not for atrocities? The answer is uncomfortable, because the AU's leading member states are divided by their own interests. Some receive gold shipments. Some host foreign bases that benefit from Sudan's turmoil. Silence becomes policy. In truth, this silence is not neutrality. It's complicity through inaction. But amid the rubble, there are also sparks of courage. Sudanese grassroots movements, women's networks, and diaspora activists are documenting atrocities through satellite imagery, testimony, and independent digital archives. They are naming the dead when governments refuse to, and their question to the world and to Africa itself is piercing. If we ignore Darfur now, what precedent are we setting for the next African resource war? Look across the continent. The pattern repeats itself. In Congo, cobalt and coltan fuel chaos. In Mali, lithium and gold draw mercenaries. In Mozambique, natural gas invites foreign troops. Always the same story. Resources first, lives second. In Darfur, the RSF calls itself a protector of the nation. But how can one protect a nation by annihilating its people? Sovereignty does not mean oppression. It means control of your destiny, your resources, and your dignity. And when militias, backed by foreign sponsors, steal those in the name of power, they are the enemies of sovereignty. To my brothers and sisters watching from Ghana, from Nigeria, from Burkina Faso, ask yourselves, if gold could cause this in Sudan, what will lithium cause in the Congo? What will gas cause in Mozambique? The war for Africa's wealth is not a future threat. It's already here, disguised as ethnic clashes, as security operations, as internal conflicts. Every time a mine opens under militia control, a village somewhere closes forever. The Darfur crisis is not just a humanitarian crisis, it's a mirror. It shows the world's moral failure, yes, but also Africa's urgent need to stand together and defend its own. Because if the continent doesn't control its gold, others will control it through blood. And this is where the next question begins. How can the world, especially Africa, remain silent when the pattern is so clear, the evidence so undeniable? If we map every war zone and overlay it with maps of African mineral wealth, the borders between conflict and extraction dissolve completely, because that map tells a truth no diplomat dares to say aloud. Africa's bloodiest wars are rarely about ideology, they're about resources. The players change, the justifications shift, but the core remains constant. Someone always profits while Africans bury their dead. In Sudan, the profit is gold. In the Congo, it's cobalt. In Mali, it's lithium. In Somalia, it's the coastline. Different commodities, same formula. Arm the factions, spread chaos, keep the people divided, then extract wealth under the smoke of war. Let's break this down with clarity and precision. When the West intervenes militarily, as in Libya or Iraq, it's never framed as resource control. It's about freedom, democracy, or counter-terrorism. But when Africa burns on its own, with no strategic oil or gas to defend, it suddenly becomes an internal matter. This selective morality exposes what African leaders have long warned about. Humanitarian concern is often measured in barrels, not bodies. Sudan's case is particularly revealing. Back in 2011, Western governments rushed to sanction Khartoum for human rights abuses. But today, even as the RSF conducts what UN experts now describe as acts of genocide, sanctions on the UAE's gold trade, the RSF's lifeline, remain timid and fragmented. The message is clear. Even with an estimated 800,000 African lives lost, global trade networks remain largely unchanged. This hypocrisy echoes through African history. When Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, and Muammar Gaddafi in Libya sought to nationalize resources and assert sovereignty, they were branded dangerous or radical. But when foreign mercenaries and corrupt militias plunder African minerals, the world calls it stability. And this is where Africa's leadership must face its own reflection. The African Union was created to prevent exactly this, to protect African lives and sovereignty from external manipulation. Yet when atrocities unfold in Darfur, the AU hides behind statements of deep concern. Not one emergency force, not one unified diplomatic blockade, not even a continental summit dedicated solely to Sudan's crisis. In the eyes of millions of Africans watching from across the continent, that silence is betrayal. Because sovereignty means nothing if the continent cannot defend its own people. The AU found the will to act decisively when coups occurred in Niger, Mali, and Gabon. But why not when 800,000 civilians are killed in Darfur? Where are the African peacekeepers? Where are the sanctions on the financiers of atrocities? Some analysts and regional reports allege that business ties between certain officials and gold trade networks may influence the AU's muted response, allegations that remain unproven. If true, this is not just negligence, it's corruption masquerading as diplomacy. But beyond institutions, the deeper question remains: who profits from Sudan's chaos? Let's follow the trail of the gold once more. From the killing fields of El Fasher, it's smuggled through North Darfur, crossing the desert into Chad. There, middlemen purchase it at discounted prices, paying RSF commanders in dollars or dirhams. That gold is then flown to Dubai, refined in discreet facilities, and resold on the international market, often mixed with legitimate sources. Once it enters global circulation, it can end up anywhere, in European banks, Chinese electronics, or even American jewelry. So when we say the world is ignoring the Darfur atrocities, it's not ignorance. It's complicity wrapped in convenience. Everyone touching that gold becomes part of the silence. And yet, for every system of exploitation, Africa has always produced resistance. Across Sudan, ordinary citizens have shown breathtaking courage. Teachers, doctors, women leaders, people who refuse to flee despite bombings, documenting atrocities with broken phones and patchy internet. Some smuggle evidence to independent media, knowing that a single image from El Fasher might be the only thing preventing total erasure. One Sudanese journalist recently said, "They silence us so we disappear, but we document so we exist." That spirit, that refusal to vanish, is the essence of African resilience. Still, bravery alone cannot stop bullets. This is where African unity must evolve beyond slogans. Imagine if the African Union formed an independent continental sanctions authority, capable of freezing assets of anyone, African or foreign, proven to fund or arm genocidal militias. Imagine if African nations, instead of exporting raw gold to Dubai, built their own centralized refining hubs, transparent and sovereign. Sudan's tragedy is not inevitable, it's engineered, and what is engineered can be dismantled. It's time to dismantle the lie that Africa is poor. Sudan's gold alone could fund a national renaissance, hospitals, schools, technology parks, even space programs. But as long as Africa exports unprocessed wealth, the blood price will continue. And here is a truth the world cannot hide forever. The humanitarian catastrophe in Darfur is not just a failure of Western conscience. It's a test of African awakening. Every generation faces a moment where silence becomes complicity. For us, this is that moment. The African media must also bear responsibility. Many major outlets give more airtime to elections in Europe than to mass graves in Africa. Some fear losing sponsorships if they expose the interests of powerful Gulf or Western companies. But truth is not negotiable. Journalism that serves sovereignty is not propaganda, it's patriotism. Meanwhile, Sudan's neighbors, Chad, Egypt, Ethiopia, and South Sudan, are playing their own dangerous games. Each sees Darfur's chaos as a chance to gain leverage. Chad fears the RSF's cross-border reach, but still trades gold through unofficial routes. Egypt backs al-Burhan's army to secure influence over the Nile waters. Ethiopia and South Sudan, distracted by their own internal crises, remain on the sidelines. Instead of unity, we see fragmentation, a mirror of the continent's historical wounds. But this is exactly what external powers want: a divided Africa, too busy fighting itself to demand fair trade, equitable markets, or control over its minerals. Now, let's confront a painful but necessary truth. Humanitarian intervention is never about humanity. Many African commentators argue that NATO's 2011 intervention in Libya was driven partly by strategic and economic interests, including concerns about resource control and monetary independence. When the US stationed troops in Niger, it wasn't to protect democracy, it was to secure drone bases near uranium fields. And when the world stays silent about Sudan, it's not because they don't see. It's because they already own the pipeline of profit. The pattern is brutal but consistent. First chaos, then contracts. After every war, foreign companies arrive as rebuilders, signing mining and reconstruction deals. The same nations that ignored atrocities will soon attend Sudan's stabilization conferences, shaking hands over investment opportunities, while mass graves lie just beyond the camera's frame. This is why true sovereignty must mean economic self-reliance. Africa cannot keep waiting for global sympathy. Powerful nations often prioritize interests over compassion. Only Africans can protect Africa. So as we close in on the story's heart, understand this. The Darfur atrocities are not only about Sudanese tragedy, it's about the future of African agency. Will we allow another generation's blood to finance someone else's luxury? Or will we reclaim control, not through empty resolutions, but through united, strategic, Pan-African power, economic, political, and moral? Because if we don't, the same satellites that now record Darfur's devastation may soon witness another tragedy elsewhere in Africa, and the world will once again look away. And that, my brothers and sisters, is why we cannot let this story fade. This is not just Sudan's fight, it's Africa's wake-up call. But there's one final question that demands an answer. One that cuts deeper than politics or power. If gold, gas, and oil can blind the world to atrocities, what will it take for African lives to finally have equal value in the global system?